Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're kicking things off today with, well, a really dramatic statement. A warning reportedly coming from Ethiopia's leadership that definitely makes you sit up and listen.
Yeah, it's quite something. The line was, if there is any Ethiopian who believes that Ethiopia will forever remain a geographic prisoner, that person is a dead one. Pretty stark.
Stark is the word. It's using, life and death language for what is essentially a geopolitical goal, getting sovereign sea access.
Absolutely. It's designed to stir things up, frame it as an existential issue.
Right. And that's where we come in today, and where you, our listener, come in. Our mission is to cut through that really intense rhetoric about Ethiopia wanting sea access. We need to understand the actual arguments, both for getting this sovereign window to the sea, and maybe more importantly, the arguments against how they seem to be going about it.
Exactly. We're looking at sources that really set up two opposing views here. On one hand, you've got this very strong political story built on emotion, feeling, encapsulated, historical destiny, that kind of thing. And then on the other side, there's a much more practical, almost mundane approach. It's all about cooperation, existing commercial law, being good neighbors. We need to figure out which side holds up better under scrutiny.
Okay, let's dive into that first one then, this idea of encapsulation. What's the core emotional argument that officials from the ruling Prosperity Party are pushing?
It really centers on this idea, this imperative, they say, to break encapsulation. They paint this picture of Ethiopia, huge country, over 120 million people, as being unfairly boxed in.
Like its potential is choked off because it doesn't have its own coastline.
Precisely. But then you look at the analysis from others in the region, and they describe that rhetoric as banal as it is disingenuous.
Strong words. Why disingenuous?
Well, because the sources argue it's a powerful political slogan, maybe, but commercially, it doesn't really hold water. The key thing is Ethiopia already has what's effectively a buyer's market for sea access.
A buyer's market. How does that work if the whole narrative is about being geographically trapped?
Yeah, see, that's the crucial distinction. Being landlocked isn't the same as being commercially cut off. Ethiopia has working, legal, and commercial agreements with 6 of its neighbors.
6.
6. Eritrea, Djibouti, Somalia, Kenya, South Sudan, Sudan. It uses ports, particularly Djibouti's, for the vast majority of its trade. There are dedicated customs corridors, decent tariff deals.
So it's not like they can't get goods in and out. It's more that they'd prefer outright ownership instead of these transit agreements.
That seems to be the crux of it. Saying the country is commercially encapsulated just ignores the huge volume of trade that's already flowing and the legal structures that make it happen. You've got trade lanes, special zones, legal frameworks. When you stack all that activity up against the dramatic language, the whole boxed-in claim starts to look a bit thin.
I get it. So the sources are kind of saying calling Ethiopia encapsulated with all these routes available. It's like saying the elephant in the room is trapped by the furniture.
That's a great analogy from the sources, yeah. The point being, size and population don't automatically give you the right to, push your neighbors around or demand territory.
Right.
Especially in Africa, regional stability hinges on cooperation, respecting established borders, even those colonial-era ones, and following the rules, like those in the African Union Constitutive Act, not on who's biggest or loudest.
And those statements we started with, the death or confinement ones, they might work for a political rally, but they really harm actual diplomacy.
Oh, absolutely. Neighbors hear that, and they don't hear national aspiration. They hear a threat, potential dominance. It just raises tensions.
Okay, so this brings us to a really key point you mentioned.
Yeah.
The confusion being sown between two very different ideas.
Yes, this is critical. The rhetoric kind of works by deliberately blurring the lines. We need to be really clear for everyone listening. What is the actual difference between owning a sea outlet, the Amharic, is attainment, and just having access to the sea, which is ene?
And I imagine for a lot of people caught up in the rhetoric, those might sound pretty much the same.
They sound similar, but legally and practically, they're worlds apart. Owning a port means full sovereign control.
Like your flag flies there, your laws apply.
Exactly. You control the land itself, the administration, the security. You set the maritime rules, collect all the tariffs, full legal jurisdiction. It's your territory.
And that's not something a neighbor can just, gift wrap and hand over. The sources say, like a cup of water.
No way. Handing over sovereignty means giving up territory. That's a huge deal for any country. It strikes at the heart of territorial integrity, which is basically rule number 1 for nation states.
But access, using someone else's port through an agreement, that's completely normal, right? Happens everywhere.
All the time. Access through a transit state is standard practice. It's legal, it's based on contracts, it happens daily across the globe. It's not coercion, it's just business and diplomacy.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. The sources point out several. South Sudan uses Port Sudan in Sudan. You have landlocked countries all over West Africa using coastal ports. And the classic case is Bolivia. They lost their coast in a war way back, but they continually negotiate transit rights through Chile.
So it's about deals, negotiation, logistics, not taking territory.
Precisely. It's commerce, not conquest.
Okay, so let's connect the dots for the listener.
Yeah.
Blurring that line between ownership and access. What's the effect? It seems like it just pumps up that trapped feeling.
It does. It fuels the narrative. It raises expectations at home to maybe unrealistic levels. And yeah, it definitely strains relationships with neighbors because you're essentially asking for the impossible, their sovereign land.
Whereas the practical path, the low drama path, it's just agreements, cooperation, maybe a bit of common sense.
That's what the sources argue, and they're quite critical because they see a real cost to this rhetorical game. They argue that this deliberate confusion, this misleading of the population, has already had tangible negative consequences.
Like what?
False hope, for one, which can lead to political frustration down the line, but also misallocating resources, focusing energy and potentially money on this instead of pressing domestic needs, and of course creating unnecessary tension, even risking conflict in the region. Misleading talk isn't free. It costs real money and potentially lives.
But doesn't that kind of rhetoric, even if it's maybe twisting things a bit, doesn't it work politically in the short term? Rallying people?
Oh, it can, definitely. National pride is a powerful tool. You can distract people for a while with grand visions, but eventually reality bites, right? Ports need managing, securing, they need billions in investment, and crucially, you still need your neighbors to cooperate for transit to work smoothly. So the sources basically frame it as unsustainable political theater using nationalism to paper over cracks at home.
Okay, this is where it gets even more charged, though, because the rhetoric hasn't just stayed vague, it's escalated. There are specific threats, historical claims being thrown around, really pushing things.
Yeah, it's gone beyond just complaining about geography or definitions. We've seen reports of officials openly suggesting that if diplomacy doesn't work, access might be secured. Well, by force.
That's a huge escalation.
Yeah.
Crossing a major line.
It is, and it's being linked to other big national projects, trying to give it this air of destiny. The Prime Minister, for example, reportedly said something like, "Since the millennial dream of the Nile has been realized," referring to the Djibouti Dam, "the Red Sea issue is only a matter of time."
Wow. So comparing it to the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which was seen as absolutely non-negotiable, a huge national undertaking, that sends a strong signal.
It signals this isn't just about negotiating a better transit deal. It's being framed as a fundamental national right, almost manifest destiny.
And then there's a history angle.
Right. Officials bringing up Ethiopia's imperial past, claiming the Red Sea was part of Ethiopia 30 years ago.
30 years ago. That puts it squarely in the time frame of Eritrean independence.
Exactly. And the sources we're looking at are really clear. They call these historical claims inaccurate and seriously destabilizing. It looks like an attempt to create a sort of historical justification for what would otherwise be seen as, well, illegal ambitions.
And connecting this to the bigger picture, why is that kind of historical revisionism seen as so dangerous for the whole region?
Because it attacks the very foundation of how African states relate to each other. The bedrock principles are sovereignty, territorial integrity, non-interference. These are written into the AU's Constitutive Act, the UN Charter.
The idea that borders once set shouldn't be changed by force.
Exactly. So if you start saying your neighbor's sovereign territory, like Eritrea's coast, actually belongs to you based on some historical claim from 30 years ago or 100 years ago, where does that stop?
Yeah, it potentially opens Pandora's box.
Yeah.
Every country could start digging up old maps.
Right. It invites chaos. That's why it's seen as crossing a dangerous red line. It challenges the whole system that provides, at least some stability.
It does seem incredibly risky, maybe disconnected from today's realities. There was that Eritrean proverb cited in the sources.
Yes. A butterfly that claims to cover the earth cannot even cover its own backside.
Pretty pointed. A clear rebuke of perceived overreach.
It is. And it leads us right to the big question for you, the listener. If the commercial access is basically there and the rhetoric is so risky, why push this now? What does the timing tell us about what might be going on inside Ethiopia?
Suggests the real problem might not be external access, but internal pressures.
That's precisely the analysis coming through in the sources. Ethiopia is facing, well, multiple serious crises at once. The economy is in deep trouble, huge debt, needing IMF and World Bank help.
Inflation, too, right? Cost of living is sky high.
Cripplingly high. And on top of that, you have major internal conflicts still simmering or active. Think Tigray, Oromia, other regions. Lots of displacement, lots of instability.
Okay, so you've got this backdrop: debt, inflation, internal conflict, and yet the government is pouring political energy into this high-stakes external issue about sea access.
It paints a particular picture, doesn't it? The argument in the sources is that the regime is using this external adventurism. One source even called it coastal cosplay.
Oh, okay.
And these big conferences and nationalist campaigns basically to distract the public, to divert attention from the very real problems at home.
Turn internal weakness into a show of external strength. Make it seem like the problems are caused by outsiders boxing them in.
Exactly. It's a classic playbook, sadly. Struggling governments often try to rally people around the flag against a perceived foreign enemy or injustice when they're losing legitimacy domestically.
So the main goal might not even be getting a port, but shoring up political support at home.
That's identified as a primary driver in the analysis we've seen. And this focus on grand metaphors, on sovereignty struggles, it's totally out of sync with what people in the region actually prioritize day to day.
You mean ordinary Eritreans, Somalis, Djiboutians?
Yeah, and ordinary Ethiopians too, arguably. People want tangible things: jobs, schools, affordable food, decent roads, reliable power, security. They want practical improvements.
Not necessarily arguments about historical maps.
Right. And focusing political capital on sovereignty claims actually pulls resources and attention away from things that could genuinely drive progress. Real development comes from, building the railway that gets farmers' crops to the port efficiently.
Connecting entrepreneurs to markets, integrating economies.
That's the pathway the sources point to. The answer isn't forced ownership or noisy rhetoric. It's about replacing that loaded word encapsulated with the word that actually matters for 120 million people: integrated.
Integrated.
Yeah.
Meaning connected through real infrastructure and stable agreements.
Yeah, built on concrete and contracts, not just slogans. Things like better roads, modern railways, efficient ports operating under clear, fair, legal trade rules. That's how you build prosperity. Ports are for commerce, ultimately not for coercion.
That's the constructive vision, building things that genuinely improve lives and create shared wealth, rather than, floating aggressive ideas that just cause friction and risk. So this deep dive really lays out a stark choice for you, the listener, to ponder. It's the choice between pursuing national progress through lawful, cooperative, commercially sensible means,
Or risking regional stability by pushing unilateral claims for sovereignty over territory that belongs to others.
the key takeaway seems pretty clear then.
Yeah, cooperation needs respect. It needs legal clarity. It needs everyone involved to actually want stability. You can't really get there through threats or by demanding things that aren't yours to demand. Any short-term buzz you get from fiery rhetoric, it's probably wiped out by the tension and risk it creates.
Which leaves us with a really important final thought for you to chew on after we finish. Building on what the sources said about the high cost of this misleading talk, just how much do these false expectations, fueled by grand metaphors like imprisonment and destiny, end up costing a nation?
Think about it in real terms. The actual money potentially wasted or diverted. The damage to trust between neighbors, which takes years to rebuild. And maybe most importantly, the opportunities missed the chance to build genuine, practical, mutually beneficial integration that could have happened instead.
That's definitely something worth mulling over. What's the real price tag on political distraction versus practical development?
It can be measured in lost decades sometimes.
We really encourage you to keep thinking about this dynamic lawful cooperation versus sovereign demands, especially in the complex context of the Horn of Africa.